if you have been the victim of a hit and run driver, so that means, let's define hit and run, kind of self-defines it itself, but I want to make sure I'm clear on what context that I'm speaking about in the idea of a hit and run. A hit and run is someone who hits your car, causes harm to your car and to you, in all probability, and leaves the scene of the wreck without notifying you, giving you information as to their identity and insurance information, address, those kind of things, and waits for the police to come to the scene if police need to be called, and waiting to see if you're okay. And they hit you, and they hurt you, and they leave. That's what I mean by hit and run. So are you out of luck if you are the victim of a hit and run wreck? And the answer is, most of the time, no, if you've got coverage on your car. And most people do have coverage on their car because that's the law. but if you have coverage on your car and you're hit by a hit and run driver, and we cannot find the identity of that hit and run driver, and I'm going to tell you a story of one here in a little bit, but let me get through the why you're not out of luck with being hit by a hit and run driver. So you look to your policy, your automobile policy coverage, under the uninsured coverage to determine your coverage amounts. So whatever you have on your coverage and your policy, the amounts of, then that is what covers you for a hit and run driver. So your insurance company kind of stands in the shoes, the phantom shoes, so to speak, of the hit and run driver, and provides coverage as if that hit and run driver was identified and they didn't leave the scene of the wreck, and they were providing coverage of your car and of you, most importantly. Car is always second, clearly. A lot of people care about their car, but I care about you most importantly. So you look to your policy, the bottom line, for any hit and run situations there. Hopefully that will never happen. But here's the story that I wanted to share with you, which was kind of interesting. So I had a hit and run situation. I represented a client who was hit by this driver, and it was a pretty bad wreck. He damaged, and I know it was a he because we did find him later on. He damaged his car pretty severely, however, not bad enough for him to drive off. In the process of driving off, he busted his tire. And so that left an exposed rim where his tire was. And he made marks in the pavement all the way to grandma's house because that's where he lived. So we were able to follow the police. I wasn't on scene, but the police were there, and they were able to follow this mark all the way to grandma's house. And he was certainly identified by the car and apprehended and was charged with felony hit and run. So there are two types of hit and runs, and this is just for point of my clients and potential clients there to understand what hit and run is, and it's punished criminally. So there's two types of hit and runs, or two levels of punishment, that's a better way to describe it, or charges for hit and run. Same hit and run. So if you hit a car and you know that there's a potential for causing injury or harm to a human being, we know you hit the car and made damage to the car, but it's bad enough that you think that you, or there's a reasonable idea that you've injured somebody else in the car that you hit, you can be charged with felony hit and run. Felony hit and run. So the punishment is over 12 months, 1 year plus, and then a hefty fine. If it's a minor fender bender property damage, it doesn't mean that you haven't hurt the person inside the other car, but there's a dent on the bumper, dent on the hit and run driver's bumper, a dent on the other car's other car bumper, then and you leave the scene, then you can be charged with misdemeanor hit and run. So that's 12 months, up to 12 months in jail, up to 12 months in jail, $2,500 fine. So there's gravities of punishment in assessing the criminal penalty for hit and run. So that that gives you a little bit of idea about hit and runs, that you're not out of luck especially if you keep good insurance. And that's why it's another point to make sure that you understand the coverage that you have in case you're hit by a hit and run driver, and other reasons too that we've covered in other talks and other videos. But if you're hit by a hit and run driver, you've got to look to your own coverage to cover you and your family for any physical loss or personal injury loss of this particular wreck. So in case you can't find this person who hit you, which most of the time is the case, that they don't find the person that hit you, and they don't leave a mark to grandma's house. That was a rare occasion. Anyway, I hope I gave you a little smile under these terrible situations where you're hit by a hit and run driver. But please, please, please look to your coverage. Make sure you've got just as much coverage that you can possibly pay for in your family, and that's reasonable. Talk with me, talk with your agent, your insurance agent, to make sure that you're amply covered. It is so, so important. I can't stress that enough. If you have any questions whatsoever, please call me, Bettina Altizer Law.